thank you very much for what you're doing. Much appreciated. Okay.
So I've more to hand out here. I think,
I'll try not to make you sick.
well, I can imagine you're all exhausted. Probably it would be...
No. I think a number of us are coming down with something, and
Yes.
it all started with Jamie, I think. And
Oh, really?
yeah, he's
Okay.
infected all of us. So no, that's not true. I'm being mean to do that, but
Jamie's fine.
he actually
fine,
struggled to come in out of his
My
sick
work
bed.
here is done.
So, but anyway,
I
yeah.
wondered
So
whether
it's not a lack of interest or weariness with the submissions. These are fantastic. I mean, this is what we're here for. Actually, this makes me want to get out of bed in the morning. Go for it.
I wondered whether it'd benefit the health of the city more if I actually spent my 10 minutes doing an exercise routine. But,
We've had it offer.
moving along. So I'm here representing the Christchurch Biodiversity Partnership, and hit the right key this time. Who, why are we? Umbrella group for lots of groups, hundreds of volunteers involved in conservation environment work, and importantly, 54 to 88%, depending on which kind of surveys you use, of citizens from the City Council's own citizen surveys want more native plants and wildlife in their neighbourhoods. This is not necessarily reflected in decision making and policies or the sort of conflicting policies in the city. This group has loosely existed for a couple of decades. We're there to support the council achieving its biodiversity strategy, and also importantly to save a lot of money being wasted, which I see all the time. We're the eyes and ears for weed and pest surveillance, and importantly we support a balance of cultural and heritage layers. We're not zealots wanting to kind of like eliminate all the colonial heritage. We're there to kind of see that all of those layers are fully represented and celebrated in the city. And this will serve, the city's image and its marketability internationally much better, we believe. So there's an army of people out there who are doing kind of stuff, planting and weeding, and really, again, and as in the previous presentation, wanting some sort of recognition and a voice to be able to debate and have dialogue with the relevant council staff to actually work together and problem solving together. And this perhaps suggests and promotes a bit of a culture shift to one that is very pro Aotearoa, Canterbury o Tautahi in all its dimensions, and projects that brand locally and internationally. And importantly, Christchurch is a reservoir of lost heritage from the plains, fortuitously. So having some sort of input into problem solving and working through some sort of formal channels that gives some status to these discussions. And just highlight a few particular examples here, things that one sees travelling around the city which represent enormous waste of city resources. Unprofessional maintenance regimes where trees are allowed to die through lack of water, or they're ringbarked through poor application of weed-eating techniques. The whole safer parks thing is a very simplistic policy that needs to be reviewed, because it looks all very nice and pretty to kind of like limb everything up, but it creates a whole lot of unintended outcomes, including increased weediness, such as occurs here. That stinking iris and ivy and stuff will kind of clothe those areas, and then that will create another sort of management problem which costs a lot of money. And weeds are a significant problem for the country and Canterbury and Christchurch. We love to watch The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, seeing those armies sort of sweeping across the Mackenzie country, but actually behind that is another sinister factor, not just the orcs or whoever it is, but the march of the wilding conifer pines. And, you know, within the city, within Banks Peninsula, that's happening with conifers, but right across the city and the country, you know, sycamore is a significant time bomb in the landscape. And, you know, the science shows, that graph there in the bottom right, that there's an exponential growth of these weed problems. And if we don't knock these on the head and maintain the funding for biosecurity, you know, we're in deep trouble. Our whole landscape will be transformed into something unrecognisable, something that's more recognisable in the Northern Hemisphere. We also need, again, you know, this requires some dialogue. Can't kind of deal with all the issues here, but we need to dispel some of the myths that I know that you hear about the use of native trees for streets. You know, we just need to plan and supply for it. You know, bigger trees being supplied by the nursery, and then apply a knowledge of ecology for the placement and maintenance of these things. And, you know, Auckland, which has, you know, more beneficent sort of environment in which to grow a greater range of native trees, shows that this can be, is widely accepted in other parts of the country. And there's a whole range of species in Christchurch and Canterbury, you know, which are quite suitable for streets and public places. Not just what I call the green fluff, you know, little tussocks and sedges, you know, which have a very short life and make hardly any impact, but our noble trees and shrubs, and here's just a few examples here. Totara, rata, tarata, the lemonwood, manatu, ribbonwood, horoweka, the lancewood, putaweta, the marble leaf, and hinau, kowhai, and hoheri. And there's, of course, Lady Isaac, so proudly standing in front of one of her natural kowhai trees out on the Canterbury Plains. And then there's a whole range of other things: matai, kahikatea, manatu, pokaka, rohutu. All of these things are large trees or tall shrubs, very suitable for you know, a Canterbury and Christchurch environment, and which would make an enormous difference to the visibility of nature and bringing up the balance of our Indigenous heritage alongside our colonial and imported heritage. And for those of you who say there's no colour in our native flora, give me a break. There's wonderful colour in not perhaps so much in the flowers, but in the fruits and in the general textures and so on of our environment. And importantly, those fruits are vital, and nectar are vital to the viability of our natural wildlife, and particularly our bush birds, our honey-eating and fruit-eating bush birds and lizards. We see here, for example, that graph shows that all of the places where bellbirds are found in a sample around South Christchurch are in the bushy parks and reserves, and none at all in the kind of conventional parks, which, you know, have just got quite sterile rows of deciduous trees with none of those food resources necessary to support those native wildlife. So again, it requires joined up thinking and partnership with the community to produce some sort of result. And don't forget, you know, all those little things too, the fungi and the insects, and there's some wonderful creatures out there in the city. I often point out, and people never realise this, that in Christchurch there's as many native plants growing wild as there are in our national parks. And, you know, we hugely underrepresent and undermarket this as an important feature of the city. And, you know, this also fits within that sort of broader landscape, that sort of spatial dynamics needed to support wildlife that moves from one stepping stone to another across the landscape and feeds in different parts of the city at different times. So you need these patches at sort of regular intervals, and we know the kind of exact dimensions of what those patches need to be and how far apart they need to be in order to achieve that ecological integrity. But importantly, it also interacts with people. It provides the right level of visibility and legibility, being able to see the stories in the land, and of course it also feeds into the health and well-being and placemaking of our communities. And I can't go past without mentioning the important component towards one of these patches is the proposed Avon Otakaro Eco-Sanctuary, or Waitakere, as it's been coined now in conjunction with Ngaitahu, which is really one of the linchpins to achieving these kind of viable presence of nature in the city, but importantly adding value to the biodiversity and to the nature experience in the city. Canterbury is the largest population centre in the country that doesn't have the human experience of our rare and endangered iconic native species, as illustrated there. And, you know, we desperately need this not only for the national effort in preserving our biodiversity, but also to raise awareness within our own community, and also to market this as part of an eco-city brand for the city. And so this is really what adds real value to the city, and also to the red zone of the city in the future. Well, I'd like to just also mention an example of how you know, these components can fit within, you know, our conventional city and in quite small spaces. Some of you who may have been to the Ellerslie Flower Show a couple of years ago may have seen this exhibit, which I was involved in designing, of a pocket park. It was that concept was originally conceived by staff at the City Council here, and part of their initial effort and visioning for the city, providing you know, green lungs for small spaces and health and well-being, with all these sort of different elements, all in this case crammed within, you know, a small space, 10 by 10 metres square. So there's lots of opportunity not only at the big spatial landscape scale, but also right down to the fine scale of highlighting our very special natural heritage. So finally, recommendations that come from this is to give effect to the formal recognition of the Christchurch Biodiversity Partnership, and this isn't the first time I've asked for this, but I'd really like it to happen this time. And I should mention that Liz Garson had established an initial step towards doing this, and I look forward to that being sort of taken in the future, with regular engagement meetings with relevant staff, and to provide an exemplar for other special interest partnerships, as was referred to in the previous presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's probably at the 10 minutes. I can't see, but look, so there isn't time for questions on this one, but I think actually seeing the photographs and hearing your presentation, linking it to the one before, I think we've all got a pretty clear message of where the submission lies, and a sneaking feeling that there might be a very strong support. There are people waiting, you know, it's just... But thank you, Colin. I'm sure that there will be follow-up questions from individual councillors from time to time. You can. Thank you very much. And could I invite Mr. Blair Hughes from Paper Plus New Brighton to come forward.